Hi, everyone. Welcome to my talk on good enough Judaism. Now, the topic good enough Judaism was taken from the expression good enough parenting, which was developed by Dr. Winnicott, psychologist. And it really got me thinking about the concept of just being good enough. And was there a place for that concept in Judaism? You know, on the one hand, we talk about growing and changing and improving, and that's such a central and key aspect of Judaism. On the other hand, we also talk about how God loves us just the way we are, and we're perfect, and we have this beautiful soul. So which is it? I mean, are we perfect just the way we are? Or do we need to grow and change? Do we need to fix ourselves? Can those two things be true at the same time? And I was thinking too about other dichotomies in Judaism. For example, we learn in the book Ethics of the Fathers, the work is not yours to finish, but neither are you exempt from engaging in it. We learn in also Ethics of the Fathers that if there is no Torah, then what's the point of money? But if you don't have money, then how can you study Torah? So those are also true dichotomies in Judaism. We have the concept that the whole world was created just for me. I am worthy for the whole world to have been created just for me. By the same token, we're supposed to learn from Abraham, who said to God, I am but dust and ashes. So there's this sense of extreme worth and this sense of extreme self-deprecation. So what do we do with these dichotomies in Judaism, and particularly with the dichotomy of good enough or never good enough? So I was thinking about the study of DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, which was developed by Marshall Linehan in the 1980s. Dialectical behavior therapy drew on the concept of dialectics in philosophy, which means that there are two opposing ideas that we argue or that we think about or that we weigh. And one of them is what we call the thesis. One of them is the antithesis or the antithesis. And then from the two, we get what we call the synthesis, the integration or combination of those two to come to a higher level of truth. So in DBT, we believe the following things. Number one, all things are interconnected, all ideas. We don't have an either or, we have a yes and. Number two, change is inevitable. Things will always be changing and fluctuating. And finally, that opposites can be integrated to come to a closer approximation of truth. So I would like to use this model of DBT to figure out how we can arrive at a greater level of truth with these two concepts. Good enough, never good enough. First, let's make the case for never good enough, or as I prefer to call it, grow and change, right? We'll put it in a positive light. Grow and change. What's the case for Judaism believing in the concept that a person should always try to grow and change, always try to be better? So I'd like to present you with a few sources to flesh out that idea. Source number one is from a book, Orchot Tzadikim, or The Ways of the Righteous, which was written anonymously about 500 years ago and is considered a classic text of what we call Musar, or the study of character development, character improvement through a spiritual lens. Here is a quote from that book. Every man of heart must strive with all of his faculties to reach the ultimate that he can achieve of the higher qualities. And he must employ his five senses and the abundance of his thoughts and traits only in that which must result in loving kindness and good deeds. In other words, you are obligated to use everything that you have in your life, all of your talents, all of your faculties, all of your strengths, to always try to do better. This being the ultimate good. So that if a man has attained a level of good, he should always desire to ascend to yet a higher level. Meaning that a person can never be complacent. A person can never just put down their arms and say, I'm done. I'm done growing for today. And if you think about it, this is how most people approach making money. Most people, they don't ever say, oh, I made enough money for today. I'm good. I made enough money for this year. I think I won't go back to work until January 1st, right? They feel like, well, it's never enough. I could always use more. And that is the same sort of drive and ambition, says this book, that we should be applying towards our growth and our development in our spirituality and in who we are as human beings. We know that human beings are restless and striving. You can see that by studying the psychology of human beings. We thrive on competition. We love proving ourselves to be better. If you look at all these cooking shows and all organized sports and all of this competitive dance and everything that we do today, we want to prove, we want to strive, we want to break records, we want to do better. That is a function of our spiritual drive and ambition, that we desire to grow beyond our limitations and to prove that we can do something that we thought we couldn't do. Or perhaps that competition is often projected onto other people. I want to prove that I'm better than that person, but it's still deep down a desire to push yourself past an imposed limitation. There was a man by the name of Roger Bannister. He was a British athlete and neurologist who was the first person to break the 4-minute mile. It was previously believed that nobody could run a mile in 4 minutes until he did it. And after he did it, after he sort of broke that self-imposed human limitation that said it couldn't be done, many other people did it after him as well. And this is what he wrote: however ordinary each of us may seem, we are all in some way special and can do things that are extraordinary, perhaps until then even thought impossible. So we see when we study the human condition that people do have this drive and desire to never rest and to never be complacent and to never stop, but rather to push ourselves. So that's one argument for the grow and change model. Push yourself, do better, you can do it. Never say never. We have another interesting teaching from a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, who was an Italian rabbi and philosopher and scholar who lived in the 1700s. He actually passed away in his late 30s, and the amount of Torah literature that he left to us at such a young age is staggering. One of the many books that he wrote is called Derech Hashem, The Way of God, and in it he outlines what are the mechanisms, what are the patterns with which God uses to run his world. This is what he says. The purpose of the creation of the human species is that man should become worthy of attaining true good, namely, being drawn close to God in the world to come, the afterlife, the next world. Hence, the ultimate end of all his evolvements is the tranquility in the world to come. Now, I know this is super abstract. Stay with me here. This is a world, end quote. So Rabbi Luzzatto is saying that the whole purpose of us in this world is to achieve and prepare and get ready for what is waiting for us in an eternal afterlife. Now, whatever it is that you believe about the afterlife or what happens to us after we die, just hold that for one moment and follow this metaphor with me. If somebody has a big test that they're studying for, right? Let's say you're taking the bar exam, right? And you have months to prepare for this exam, right? Clearly, you will use every opportunity that you have to study. If your exam is scheduled for July, right? Like we said before, you're not going to stop in May and say, hey, I'm good, I finished studying. Of course not. You're never finished studying. You're going to study and study and study and do as much as you can and achieve as much as you can until you're at the last minute, until you're at the deadline, until you're at the finish line. Why? Because there's no real end point. The more time you have to study, the more you'll study. The more you study, the more prepared you'll be. The more prepared you are, the better you'll do. This is an exact parallel to the Jewish concept of our world and the next world, the afterlife, is that we are here in this world as preparation, and we are preparing an eternal life for ourselves. If you look around at this world, there is so much in this world that we do not understand. There are so many things that happen here that don't make sense. And Judaism teaches that there is an afterlife, a world of truth, in which all the injustices will be righted and in which everything will make sense. A big part of what we're doing here in our lifetime on this planet, other than all the things that we're supposed to try to accomplish while we're here, we're supposed to try to become better people. We're supposed to try to make this world a better place. We're supposed to do acts of kindness. We are supposed to try to show the world what godliness, what kindness, what goodness looks like. And that actually is the majority of the focus of the Torah, is what are you supposed to do right here, right now in this world? But also, Judaism teaches that there's a next world and that this world is finite. This world is temporary. This world is illusory. And the next world is permanent and eternal. So just as a person would study for a test because they're going to have that moment of reckoning in the next phase, right? And once you start taking the test, it's like hands off. You can't study anymore. You can't do anything anymore. All you can do, all you have when you sit down to take that exam is to draw upon whatever you prepared. And if you didn't prepare it, you don't have access to it anymore. That ship has sailed. So too, when a person gets to the next world, right? They're going to have a lot of questions from God. Who were you? What did you do? Did you behave honestly? Did you take Judaism seriously? And they're not going to be able to change anything at that point. You can't go back and edit the video. All you have is what you did. All you can access is what you have prepared. So you're never done. You're never done here. Where there's life, there's hope. The more you study, the more you have. The more you do, the more you'll own in the next world. So how can a person ever really say, I'm good enough, I'm done? But you're never done, because as Rabbi Luzzatto says, everything we do in this world is preparation for the world to come. So at what point would a human being really say, I'm done preparing for eternity? It doesn't really make sense. So that's another argument for the grow and change model of Judaism. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, a rabbi who lived several hundred years ago, he was the founder of the Musar movement, this movement for ethical character improvement. He was really inspired one time by a shoemaker, where he passed by this shoemaker who was repairing shoes, and it was so late at night, and he had this candle burning. And he said to the shoemaker, why are you still up, and why are you still repairing shoes? And the shoemaker said to Rabbi Salanter, this is how it goes in Hebrew, and then I'll translate it. Kol zman shahaner dolek efshar od letaken. As long as the candle is burning, I still can make repairs. And when Rabbi Salanter heard this expression, he interpreted it as he interpreted everything through the lens of spirituality. And he said, what a perfect metaphor that is. As long as the candle is burning, I can still repair. And we know in Judaism that a candle is compared to a human soul. That's why we light a candle when a person passes away. That's why we light a candle on somebody's yahrzeit. And so as long as the candle's burning, as long as your soul is burning, as long as you're alive, you can still make repairs. Do we value the power of time? Do we value the gift that is time? That every minute that we have in this world is an opportunity to do better and to be better. I'd like to read you a poem from French-Jewish poet Marc Levy and novelist. This is what he wrote. If you want to know the value of 1 year, just ask a student who failed a course. If you want to know the value of 1 month, ask a mother who gave birth to a premature baby. If you want to know the value of 1 hour, ask the lovers waiting to meet. If you want to know the value of 1 minute, ask the person who just missed the bus. If you want to know the value of 1 second, ask the person who just escaped death in a car accident. And if you want to know the value of 1/100th of a second, ask the athlete who won a silver medal in the Olympics. Every minute is precious. Every second is precious. Every 100th of a second is valuable. How can we waste any of it? That's the case for Grow and Change. You're never done. It's never enough. We're preparing for something here. Time is a precious gift. How can we ever say good enough? Now I'd like to pivot and focus on the case for good enough Judaism. You're perfect just the way you are. Does Judaism have backup for that concept? Yes, actually it does. I'd like to start with a source from the book, as I mentioned, Ethics of the Fathers, one of my favorite texts. And here is a teaching from Ethics of the Fathers, chapter 3, Mishnah 14. Beloved is man, for he was created in the image of God. Especially beloved is he, for it was made known to him that he was created in the image of God. Meaning, not just did God create us in his image, but he made sure to tell us, to let it be known to us that we are created in his image. And there's more to that quote, but that's the part that I'd like to focus on. The fact that every human being is created in God's image, and the Jewish people particularly are like God's firstborn child. And that we are so precious and valuable to God just by virtue of existing. Related and conditional to nothing, apropos of nothing, dependent on nothing. If we would not achieve a single thing in this universe, if we would never grow or change, if we would not improve our character traits, if we would not make ourselves better people, if we would not make this world a better place, we would still be inherently precious and beautiful to God just by virtue of the fact that we are created in his image, full stop. Every single human being has inherent value. Now, you have to understand what a mind-blowing concept this is that Judaism brought to the world. In ancient cultures, people were killed if they were born deformed or if they were considered too old to be of value to society. Judaism introduced to the world this concept of basic human dignity, kavod habriot, that a person has inherent worth just by virtue of being human, just by virtue of existing. And the Torah teaches us that as Jewish people, we are the children of God. Banim atem lashem Elokechem. It says in the book of Deuteronomy, you are the children of God. There's a little story to demonstrate how far we are from truly understanding this concept. Imagine in ancient times you have a fabulously wealthy king with a treasure house full of valuables. And the king's two servants are arguing about how rich the king is. And one of them says, the king is so rich, he has 100 gold coins. And the other person responds and says, what are you talking about? The king is so rich, he has 100,000 gold coins. And they have this argument. And if you think about it, both of those opinions are insulting to the king. The king doesn't have 100 coins and the king doesn't have 100,000 coins. The king has millions and billions of properties and investments and treasure houses full of so much more than any one of his servants could possibly fathom. That is exactly how we underestimate our king. We think God loves us, but I don't know, maybe he really doesn't. Am I really lovable? Today I made this mistake. Today I acted stupid. We're down on ourselves. We're hard on ourselves. Could God really love me? I'm so imperfect. I'm so flawed. We're like those kings arguing. We're like those servants, arguing. Does the king have 100 gold coins or does the king have 100,000 gold coins? Do we understand? Do we have any connection to the bottomless love that God has for us? We don't. We shortchange God on a regular basis. We don't even understand our inherent worth. We don't even understand what unconditional love means, that God could love us so fully and so completely, so independent of our mistakes or our flaws or our weaknesses. In fact, God created our flaws and our mistakes and our weaknesses. He is exactly the one who made us this way. When God created us in his image, he said to his angels, Na'aseh Adam, let us make man. Let us make man in our image. I, says God, want you, the angels, you, human beings, to be my partners in creating man. Look how humble God is that he says, let us make man. You think God couldn't unilaterally create humans? He needed help. He needed a board. He needed a team. What was God doing? And some say that let us make man means that God was inviting humans to partner with him in the creation of humankind. Meaning, human beings, says God, I know that you're flawed, and I know that you're weak, and I know that you will make mistakes, and that's okay. I am the one who made you that way. I am the one who literally created that dynamic. You know what I want you to do about it? I want you to try your best to get better. That's all I ask of you. Try your best to do better. Take whatever flawed level I created you at and try to bump it up. That's all I ask of you. But even if you don't do that, you are worthy just exactly the way you are, just by virtue of existing, just by virtue of the fact that I blew a beautiful, perfect, holy soul within you that can never be destroyed. And I have lit a fire inside of you that can never be extinguished. And even human beings who make terrible choices and have terrible mistakes, right? The Torah teaches that that's like growing plaque over your internal organs. But your internal organs, that most deep level of human that you are on the inside, that never gets tainted and that never gets destroyed. And that fire never gets dimmed or extinguished. There are coverings over it. In the Kabbalistic sources, we talk about klipa. Klipa means a shell. And you can sometimes actually see this with people who sort of grow an outer shell over themselves, where they're like hardened and they protect themselves against the world, and they constantly have their fists up like they're ready to fight. Why? Because they're protecting themselves. They have a shell over themselves. But that inner light, that inner fire, that neshama, that soul, as we say, is not ever extinguished, because really even that human being with that tough, hard shell and with their fists up at the world, that human being is not irredeemable. Under all that junk, that human being has a fire, a soul that is a spark of God, that is constantly lit, that is never getting extinguished. So how do we integrate these two truths? We have the truth that we're never done and that we always have to strive and grow. And we have the truth that we are a perfect and beautiful child of God exactly the way we are. How do we use this model of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis to come to an integration of these two concepts to arrive at a higher truth? So I have 3 approaches for how we can integrate these two concepts into a higher truth. Approach number 1 is the concept of phases. In our lives, we are going to go through different phases where we're going to need to draw upon different ones of these truths in order to become our best selves. One time when I was going through something difficult in my life, I talked to a woman that I'm very close with, a Rebbitzin of mine. Her name is Mrs. Miriam Barkin. She lives here in Cleveland where I live. And at that time, I was very broken about certain things that I was going through, and I was crying to her on the phone. And I remember her telling me, Ruchi, this is not the time for you to grow and change. This is not the time for you to take on new mitzvahs or to do more prayers or to pressure yourself to be better. She said, right now you're in survival mode. Right now you are treading water, and all you need to do is maintain. Just try to maintain your level of faith. And that is a huge achievement for where you are right now. Later, at a different time, when you're in a better place, when you're calmer, when you're healthier, when you're able, you'll ask yourself if it's the right time, if you're ready to grow your Judaism, to deepen your spirituality, or to perhaps expand your observance. Not now. Now, that conversation happened maybe 6 years ago. I remember it literally like it was today. It had such a powerful impact on me that could be an appropriate Jewish response, that could be a valuable way to process what I was going through and these conflicting feelings inside of me, like, I should do more, I can't do more. I should do more, I can't do more. Phases. Sometimes you got to push yourself to grow and change. Sometimes you got to just tread water. The second approach that I'd like to suggest for synthesizing these two truths is that one spawns the other. What do I mean by this? If a person can really accept themselves exactly the way they are, if a person can really believe, I am a perfect, beautiful, worthy child of God no matter what I do, I have then arrived at a place of self-acceptance such that I truly understand that I'm worth investing in, right? If I am worthy and I am hopeful and I am encouraged, well, I'm worth investing in. I'm worth developing. I'm worth growing because I'm valuable. If you have a really sound business idea, that's great. That business is worth investing in. If you have an athlete in front of you who has talent, that athlete is worth investing in. So because I have so much amazing potential, because I am a child of God, therefore I am worthy to be pushed to grow and change. So that is my second approach, is that because I accept myself, I am now free to fly. And the third approach that I'd like to suggest for synthesizing these two truths is that sometimes these different messages are for different people. You know, there are some people who have a voice in their head that never stops. Not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. We call them women. Okay, I'm generalizing. And then there are some people who have a voice inside of their heads that says, you're fine, good enough, don't worry about it, whatever, it's somebody else's problem. So to the first person who's constantly got this inner critic, that person needs to overcompensate with the "you're perfect just the way you are" message. And to the person who's constantly making excuses for themselves and who's lazy and arrogant and expects everybody else to do the heavy lifting, that person has to overcompensate with the message, grow and change, hurry up, this life is short. What do you have to show for yourself? So whether you are using these different phrases at different times of your life, or whether you're using one to inspire the other, or whether it's different people have to hear different phrases because of the way of the tendencies that they have as humans, I believe that these two truths have eternal value for everybody and that they're both true. And most of the time in Judaism, it's not an either or proposition. It's a yes and, that both of these concepts have value. Both of these concepts are important. Both of these concepts are true. Most people do lean too heavily in one direction or the other. We do tend to be black and white thinkers in these areas. And I think it's just so magnificent how Judaism has so much nuance and so much depth to really bring out what could seem like opposite concepts and show us how we can grow from both, from the connection and from the integration. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the rest of the conference.